Hello, welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new, you're welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and on Sundays I do a thing called Books and Booze, where I review a book and mix up a cocktail. This month we've been looking at how power silences victims, making this week's book The Spider, Inside the Criminal Web of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell by Barry Levine. The accompanying cocktail is a Lolita Margarita, which is 2 ounces of Tequila Reposado, 1 ounce of lime juice, 2/3 ounce of honey syrup, and 2 dashes of Angostura Bitters. So let's do this. I may have to be supplementing my Reposado with some Cuervo Special because I don't know if I have 2 ounces of Reposado. All right, Jeffrey Edward Epstein was born January 20th, 1953 to Seymour Epstein and Pauline Epstein de Stolovsky. His parents were both first generation born in the United States, his grandparents having immigrated to the United States following the Jewish pogroms in Russia, Poland, and others. I think it was Poland. He grew up in Seagate, which is a small community of other Jewish immigrants in Brooklyn. He would be joined 18 months later by his brother, Mark. So there was just the 2 Epstein children growing up in that household. I am definitely going to be supplementing with Cuervo Special. I'll just deal with it. It's fine. Thought I had enough until I actually saw the amount in the bottle, and I was like, oh, I don't quite have enough. I don't have 2 ounces. We'll make do. We'll make do. Get back up there. Particularly like tequila cocktails anyway, so I'm not sure if I'll be drinking the whole thing as is. Epstein was unquestionably bright, all right? He skipped 2 grades, graduated at 16 from Lafayette High School. His classmates didn't really have anything bad to say about him on remembrance. He was the smart kid. He was seen as charming and funny. Traits which he apparently abandoned when he became rich, because it seems like the more embroiled he became in later pedo pursuits, the less he cared about charming his victims, choosing to just throw money at the problem instead. But we'll come back to that. After high school, he attended Cooper Union, which was, I guess, and is a highly selective university known to produce some of the best engineers and architects. And Epstein fit right in there. He very much was something of a math genius. He was seen as a brilliant student, but he dropped out after 2 years, transferring instead to New York University, where he again dropped out without receiving a degree. And in 1974, I guess 1974 was when he dropped out, he decided to become a teacher instead. Didn't have any kind of degree, but he wanted to be a teacher instead. And he got a teaching job at the Dalton School, which is kind of stunning. He was able to get a job there with no degree, because that's where the elite sent their children to high school. All right, I mean, like the richest of the rich, that's the school their kids went to. The teachers made outstanding salaries for being, school teachers. Everybody always says teachers get so treated, they don't get enough salary. Well, not at the Dalton School. They were paid exceptionally well, and he would have been one of those paid exceptionally well because he was a teacher there. I have to eyeball a 2/3 of an ounce. I did almost a full ounce because I don't like tequila, so we're going to throw a little extra honey at that problem. Now, he was like 21 when he joined the staff, 21, 22. So he was closer in age to some of his students than he was to his fellow staff members. Shit. Hey, honey? Can I get your help opening this bottle when you get a minute? It's very stuck.
This is for the Epstein book?
Yeah, this is the Angostura Bitters. It's very stuck. The lid is stuck. It's been opened before, but yeah, it's gummy on there or something. Thank you. Big, strong man. Thank you. For in or out?
You just use me for my strength to open alcohol bottles. I know.
You know your place.
Yeah.
2 dashes of Angostura Bitters. So where was I? Oh, he was closer in age to some of his students and some of his fellow staff members. And he stood out in another way because he didn't have a college degree. Like every other staff member there had at least a bachelor's. Some of them had more advanced degrees. Despite this, he spent a relatively uneventful year. I think he only taught 1 year, the 75-76 school year. He did show up to one of the students' parties, which was weird. I mean, that's, teachers don't socialize with the kids, not now, and they shouldn't have been back then, so that was a little odd. The kids were like, hey, Mr. Epstein, what are you doing here? Because he was a teacher, he was not one of their peers. But nothing really happened here, as anybody can remember, hi, Frey. You know what? Let me shake this up. Good and gold. Levine says this is most likely where his involvement with young girls began, and he's most likely right. Just because nobody remembers anything doesn't mean the right kids were interviewed for the book, or the right people, right? Not kids anymore, obviously, or were willing to speak about it. All right. They might be embarrassed to have been one of his first victims, or especially if they're the children of the wealthy, they're not used to being victims. So they might simply just have not said anything. Now, he was actually sacked at the end of the 1976 semester, 75-76 school year, ostensibly for being an uninspiring teacher, which did not matter in the slightest because the year he spent teaching the children of the rich got him the intro he needed when he met Bear Stearns CEO Alan Ace Greenberg. And Greenberg liked the cut of Epstein's jib, gave him an introduction to market trading at Bear Stearns, with Greenberg acting as his mentor. And he did very well at Bear Stearns for about 5 years. All right, he did have a head for numbers, as I said earlier. Math was very much his milieu. He was on the fast track to wealth with all that he learned at Bear Stearns. He was handling high-end accounts, earning a high salary. He was very much on his way up. But this all came to an abrupt end in 1981, and there were several reasons given. The ones that's provided generally by their human resources department is that they found out that he did not have a bachelor's degree. And saying that he lied on his resume, that's going to be unlikely to get Bear Stearns sued, which is completely irrelevant at this point. That company went belly up in 2008. But back in 81, and up until 2008, they needed to cover their own asses, make sure they didn't get sued by any of their clients. Epstein certainly wasn't going to sue him because, in addition to the having lied on his resume, he was also suspected of insider trading. He never saw sanctions from the SEC, as the Securities and Exchange Commission, because Epstein voluntarily resigned. So he quit rather than being fired. But his days as a trader were over as of March 12th, 1981. He lost his licenses to trade, so he couldn't do it anymore. From there, he opened his own business, not trading, no licenses. He was legally barred from trading. This was something that he was probably uniquely qualified to do. He set himself up as somebody who could find missing money. So, if fraud was committed, he said he could find the funds, and he was fairly good at that, but that's a fairly niche market, right? He also offered services advising the wealthy on investment opportunities. And then in 1984, we have Epstein's first documented allegation of rape, which didn't come to light until 2019, but we have somebody who came forward in 2019 and said, I was 13 years old in 1984 when Epstein raped me for the first time. I think that's a good spot to try the cocktail. Talking about child rape is always drink worthy. To blot out what I read, not that I'm toasting it. Trust me, I'm not toasting this. Glad I went with the extra honey. It definitely drowns out the tequila. Holy cow. So in 1984, this 13-year-old girl shows up at a vacation home that Epstein is renting. Ostensibly, he hired her to babysit. At least she was known for babysitting for some of the other people who rented out there. Epstein, of course, didn't have children, but he invited her in, offered her drugs and alcohol, and then assaulted her. And he would do that several times over the next couple of years. It's not real clear under what pretense he got her to come over after the first time. The first time it'd be easy. Hey, I need a babysitter. Come on over. I don't know why he was able to get her over there when she now knew he didn't have kids. I don't know. Nobody knows. All right. This was not real clear. It was during the 1980s that his client list would become really interesting. And I know everybody talks about the Clintons and the Trumps and the political power players, and the author certainly made his own opinions on the politics crystal clear. But what caught my eye were the international arms dealers that Epstein befriended. Because those who know how to smuggle arms would certainly know how to smuggle victims. So that one caught my eye. I'm like, that was where his real education began. And then Epstein made another leap forward financially when he met Leslie Wexner, who by the time he met Epstein was a billionaire himself, having successfully leveraged his family's fortune from running a small clothing store in Dayton, Ohio, into the international brand The Limited that encompassed Victoria's Secret, Bath & Body Works, the White Barn Candle Company, and La Senza. I'm sure there's others involved in that too. Those are the big brands. And the Victoria's Secret was particularly important because Epstein, once he met Wexner and got his in, was able to bill himself as a recruit, as a scout for Victoria's Secret modeling. Of course, that made a lot of young girls very excited and just he traded on that connection to bring himself more victims. Not too long after Epstein met Wexner, I don't know the exact timeline, I feel like it was in the book, he had impressed Wexner so much that Wexner made him like a business manager, I guess. Something that gave him power of attorney to make business decisions for Wexner and the limited body of businesses. And from here, the sky was the limit. Wexner purchased the enormous mansion in New York that would become Epstein's flagship property residence, right? He basically gifted it to Epstein. Epstein would have his, typo, would have his property in Florida just down the street from Mar-a-Lago, Trump's residence and turned golf course, and he would have a membership there. And the author tries to make much of this, but I don't feel like he made his prima facie case on that one. I don't know. I'll circle back to that at the end. And of course, the island properties in the U.S. Virgin Islands, the little St. James and big St. James or whatever they were. And his airplane, which the pilots and ground crew dubbed the Lolita Express, based on the number of very young-looking girls who would fly with Epstein to these locations. Now, I want to step out of this book just for a minute and let those who don't know where Lolita comes from, because it's frequently misunderstood to be a young girl who is trying to seduce an older man. And it's treated that way as jokes frequently, as fairly recently, I mean, a couple of years ago, with The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, she jokes about Lolita seducing her husband. It's not what happened. That is ass backwards. The phrase actually comes from a novel by Russian-American novelist Vladimir Nabokov, wherein the main character develops an obsession with a 12-year-old girl named Dolores, who he kidnaps, rapes, and calls her Lolita, which is the Spanish diminutive for Dolores. So it's not this, fun-filled, loving book of a May-December romance. It's about child rape. It's a very dark topic in a fictional setting, but still. So I bring that up because I kind of seriously wondering about the morals and ethics of the flight and ground crew who would see these young girls aboard the plane often enough to call it the Lolita Express, yet not one of them thought to wonder if the girls were in fact as young as they looked, maybe too young to be legal, and maybe somebody should call the FBI. Now, I get not wanting to risk your job, but there's also things like anonymous tip lines, there's morals, there's how the fuck do you sleep at night seeing shit like that and not dropping a dime somewhere and making a call to maybe help a girl out. So, I don't know. Regardless, we actually don't know how many victims there are, and we will likely never know for a variety of reasons. Some of it is a pervading fear of the powerful men who participated in these assaults. Some will have determined that revisiting the past isn't worth the cost to whatever peace of mind they've garnered in the present. Some will just never be found. A lot of girls were funneled through from the Eastern Bloc, from the former Soviet bloc, and we're never gonna know the true extent of the trafficking that was involved. On to Ghislaine. Ghislaine was the polar opposite of Epstein, having been born into outstanding wealth and privilege. Maxwell was also of Jewish descent. Her father, Robert Maxwell, was born Jan Ludwig Hyman Benjamin Hoch in a part of the Czech Mountains which is currently located in the Ukraine. He was part of the resistance when Germany rolled into Prague in 1938, losing his entire family to the camps during World War II. He would eventually join the British Army and change his name to Robert Maxwell, serving in the Foreign Office and building his wealth from there. He became a political player, I think it was the Labour Party, in England. He raised his children in the wealth that he had never known, and Ghislaine, who was his youngest, was the apple of his eye. He liked her, and I think her oldest brother. Like he at one point said, if I could leave it to just you two, I would, but no. Inheritance laws or some crap. So Ghislaine was born December 25th. Hope she's enjoying her time in prison. 1961 in France, and grew up in an enormous, 50-room mansion in England. And she was attending the very best schools, becoming an accomplished socialite, the belle of the party, and a witty conversationalist. She was a bit of a wild child. She landed in tabloids on more than one occasion, for which her father kind of rolled his eyes and never really seemed to chastise her, just wanting her to settle down. He was really excited when she met John F. Kennedy Jr., because he's like, that's a political connection I can get behind. But that did not happen. That all ended on November 5th, 1991, when Robert Maxwell died, having apparently fallen off his yacht and drowned. His fortune was basically gone due to lawsuits because of shady business dealings. Ghislaine was left comfortable due to money inherited from a trust, but it was not the level of wealth she had been used to, and it was around this time that she met Epstein. And kind of turned him into a project, kind of a reverse Svengali thing, teaching him how to dress and how to talk and how to behave as the uber wealthy should. And through all of this, he remained more or less reclusive, avoiding public outings and the paparazzi. I mean, not that the paps really had any idea who he was, because he was so reclusive. And then in the summer of 2000, while at Mar-a-Lago, Epstein and Maxwell noticed a pretty young girl who was reading a book on massage techniques. This was Virginia Roberts, who had already been victimized once, right? In 1996, at the age of 13, she was picked up by Ron Eppinger, who was a 65-year-old man running a modeling agency, Perfect 10, and he was also a sex trafficker. So she had already been victimized once. But 2000, she's now 17 years old. Virginia had reunited with her family and was getting her life on track. All right, she was looking at becoming a massage therapist, possibly as a way to earn money for more college endeavors. Maxwell made the initial approach. She seemed to make a lot of the initial approaches. Epstein rarely did that himself. And I will also circle back to that one later, saying that Epstein was looking for a masseuse, and if Virginia wanted to do a trial run and he liked her, Epstein would pay for her education. And Roberts initially declined. She pointed out that she didn't know what she was doing. This was basically the first book she's reading on the subject, and it wouldn't really be fair to him, right? She doesn't know what she's doing, and it wouldn't be fair to take advantage. And bless her honest little heart, man. It is truly sickening how people take advantage. But Maxwell took her number anyways, or gave Roberts her number, because she thought Roberts had a cheerful disposition, was the reason she gave. Roberts immediately went to find her dad. She didn't know any different. She went to find her dad, said, hey, these people just approached me, and I don't know, what do you think? And her dad didn't know any better, because nobody knew anything, all right? They knew he had to be rich because it was like a $200,000 membership fee at Mar-a-Lago, so he had to be rich enough to do that. And so he said it could be a wonderful opportunity, and I don't blame him. It could be a wonderful opportunity, right? If it were two people less scummy, it might have been an opening doorway to all the things she ever wanted for herself in a good way, right? Instead, this was Robert's introduction to the Epstein circle, where she would be embroiled for 2 years. Levine does go into detail as to what Roberts later Geoffrey, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, experienced with Epstein and Maxwell. But all the girls, I mean, they all tell very similar stories. So there's, in this case, there's no reason to disbelieve a single one of them, because the stories, much like with the Sandusky book I read 2 weeks ago, the stories were nearly identical and the victims didn't necessarily know each other. So the devil in those details says they're likely all telling the truth. And of course, we learn how the world got that, infamous photo of her with Prince Andrew. I'll top that up there. The breaking point for Roberts came when Epstein apparently decided he wanted a child that he and Maxwell could raise, but he didn't, want to get Maxwell pregnant, or Maxwell didn't want to carry the baby herself. Wait, she might not have been able to. She was born in 60. Yeah, she'd have been in her late 40s, so it might not have been feasible for her to get pregnant. Anyways, regardless, he asked Roberts if she would be willing to be the baby mama and then just give the child to them. And this freaked her out. For whatever reason, this was the tipping point for her, where she realized that she was not just seen as an erotic masseuse or a member of any kind of a team. She was simply a commodity to Epstein, one that he was growing tired of personally, because, he's handing her out to people like Prince Andrew and others to do what they wanted with. So she thought about this, and she talked him into sending her to, I think it was Thailand, for a massage seminar or something. And she was already intending not to come back when Kismet happened, right? Fate. She saw Robert Geoffrey. I'm mispronouncing that. I know I am. It was like an MMA fight or a Muay Thai match, something like that. He was one of the fighters, and the two fell instantly in love. All right. And they married almost immediately after they met. And then Virginia joined her new husband in Australia, told Epstein she was never coming back, and she exited the scene for a while. There were more. Like I said, God alone knows how many. Like I said earlier, we're never going to know the true extent of Epstein's perfidy. But here's what we do know. He liked them young. Not just young looking, but young. When New York eventually arrested him, and I'll come back to how that came to be, they found tons of photos of very young looking girls, many of whom were wearing braces. Now, intellectually, I knew that most people get braces when they're preteens. And I didn't, because I was dumb. I should have let my parents pay for it, but I did it when I was an adult because I was an idiot and had to pay that expense myself. But most people get their braces between the ages of 11 and 14. I Googled that. Average age people get orthodontics, 11 to 14. Most are done within a year. A few might wear them for 2. So say between 13 and 15 was his preferred age demographic, which is, as near as I could tell, not legal in any state or country outside of a few, Islam-run locations. He even tried to use as one of his excuses that, hey, it's legal in Florida for, 16, 17, whatever the age of consent in Florida was at the time. So why shouldn't it be the same in New York? Well, I mean, different states, man. They have their own laws. He liked to have them massage him, and sometimes he would just masturbate and finish himself. Sometimes he would outright rape them. But he paid them every time. He had a never-ending stream of young girls, both giving the massage and procuring others. So not just Maxwell. Started with Maxwell. But then he would have other girls bring him some. If you gave a massage, you'd be paid $300. If you brought the masseuse, you'd get paid $200. And he routinely spent between $1,500 and $2,000 a day for this little vice. At least 3 times a day, at least. Sometimes 4. $500 a pop, $200 to the procurer, $300 to the masseuse victim. Now, in January of 2006, Florida State Attorney Barry Kreischer determined to investigate the weirdness around Epstein's Florida residence. He had gotten reports of the hinkiness, and he built a pretty solid case against Epstein. I think it was April 2006 the DA brought his case before the grand jury. Ultimately, he only filed charges for, I think, 1 victim, or only brought 1 victim to the witness stand for the grand jury. While all of this is going on, Epstein is still flying between New York, Florida, and New Mexico, where he had a giant compound, and the U.S. Virgin Islands for his properties there. The U.S. attorney was set to take over the case in June of 2007, but then never filed the indictment. No idea why. Epstein's attorneys just wanted to keep it all quiet. And his big ask is he didn't want to have to register as a sex offender, which he lost out on. He was required to register. Yeah, June 2008, Epstein's attorneys had hammered out a non-prosecutorial agreement, an NPA, which would see him pleading guilty to 1 count of solicitation of prostitution and 1 count of procuring a person under the age of 18 for prosecution. So that's it, 2 counts. Right? And he had to register as a sex offender, which he didn't want, but he lost on that one. Regardless, he was sentenced to 18 months in county lockup, which was an absolute fucking joke. And I don't mean it's a joke because, like, oh my God, he only got 18 months. I mean, his sentence was a literal joke. He immediately applied for work release, which was granted, which meant for his time in prison, he was released to go about his business for up to 12 hours a day, and then would have to go back to the prison to spend his nights there. Levine describes it as spending his nights in a particularly shitty hotel, one without room service, for example. Otherwise, it was just business as usual for Epstein, including his $2,000 a day massage habit. By this point in time, Maxwell had bailed out. She did write letters of support, or emails, something like that. Immediately after his sentencing, the lawsuit started, which he settled almost as fast as they were filed, with an average settlement of about $50,000, which, if you recall from last week's book, is also what the Catholic Church offers her victims. So I guess $50K is the going rate for pedophiles. Fucking hell, man. Sick fucks. Yeah, apparently I need more alcohol to go with this one. Once his jail sentence was done, Epstein was free to continue, and he kept going. Business as usual. It was not as fun as before because the lawsuits kept rolling in, and it kept his attorneys busy. It finally dawned on Jeffrey Berman of the Southern District of New York that at least some of these crimes had to have occurred in his jurisdiction. And Epstein's former NPA with the District of Florida specified that he could not be tried for this crime again in this district, which left the court wide open for New York. Now, I rarely approve of anything coming out of New York. I think the entire state is a fucking cesspit of stupidity. But this, they did right. All right? They did 2 things very right. A couple of things wrong, but 2 things very right. First, they kept a very low profile on July 6, 2019, as they waited for Epstein's plane from Paris to land at Teterboro Airport. Then they caught him as he walked off his plane towards his car. And then, to cap off my approval for how New York handled this, the judge denied him bail. Bless him. And Epstein offered to put his entire $221 million fortune up as bond, including the property in New York, the big flagstone mansion that had a value of $26 million or something like that, and to pay for security to ensure that he did not leave his residence. The judge denied it. And he would spend what remained of his life at the Metropolitan Correctional Center. Now, the conspiracy. We all know the conspiracy, right? This went very viral during the COVID pandemic of what are they hiding? Why is this? And it's been very much in the forefront for, what are we coming up on, 6 years now? It's been 6 years. Yeah, because he died in 2019. So it's been 6 years. And everybody's like, there's no way he killed himself. The author doesn't say one way or the other. He outlines it, though, all right? He does an outstanding job laying out the last 6-ish weeks of Epstein's life, but he has no answers on the conspiracies. It could have, quite possibly, have been suicide. Epstein certainly had reason enough to off himself. In fact, he had already attempted it once at the MCC before he succeeded, or was murdered. I mean, whatever. It's actually kind of the fact that he had already tried once that lends credence to the indifference that allowed him to succeed. Usually once someone has made a credible attempt, and he was found hanging. His roommate came in and then raised the alarm and said, hey, he's trying to kill himself in here. And he was able to be revived. One is usually put on suicide watch indefinitely. And instead, he was put on a very limited suicide watch before being returned to his cell, where eventually his roommate was transferred out, leaving him alone in his cell. All very sus, right? And of course, on August 10th, 2019, he was found unresponsive in his cell and pronounced dead. Levine does do a very good job walking through those last few hours. But the big question is, why wasn't he kept on suicide watch, having had one credible attempt already made? Why did they leave him alone in his cell? And I don't just mean the guards falling asleep on night shift and not checking on him like they are required to. I mean, there are a lot of questions regarding this. A lot of questions. And it could just be gross incompetence all the way around on the part of the MCC. Absolutely. An argument against it having been suicide is that he was actually scheduled to have another bail hearing on August 12th. So 2 days, and he might have had a chance to not be in prison while awaiting trial. I think suicide is possible. Possible. I think it's very possible that he wanted to deny his victims their day in court. I think it's possible that he was a narcissist and chose to go out on his own terms rather than let anybody else have the final say over him. But remember those connections to the arms dealers? I think it's also possible that powerful people wanted to silence him. It's just another of the things that we're never going to know about Jeffrey Epstein in this saga. The last section of the book, he does go into Ghislaine Maxwell and how her attempts to run and hide and the house she bought in New Hampshire, which I think that is actually what most offends me. Well, not most offends me. It's one of the offensive things in this book, right? Most offensive is the child rape. That's just the most offensive thing ever. Like, who the fuck does that? But I think the second most offensive thing is the absolute fucking hubris of these two. I mean, individually, Epstein and Maxwell both had it well within their means and ability to flee anywhere in the world and live out their lives in quiet anonymity. All right? Move to a non-extradition country and just stay there forever. Hell, they could have moved easily to Saudi Arabia and been welcomed there. They didn't. They chose to stay in the United States because they didn't think it would ever actually catch up to them here. And that is fucking insulting. I'm, like I said, rarely approve of New York, but this they did right. On both counts. Because they did, of course, catch Epstein, or not, Maxwell in New Hampshire in 2020? I think it was 2020. And she's been in prison ever since. I hope she rots there. This whole thing was just disgusting. Levine describes it as the uber wealthy don't see people as people. They see them as conveniences. They exist to make life convenient for them. Maybe that's true. I don't know. I've never been uber wealthy. I would hope I would remember humble beginnings if that were the case, but regardless. Overall, this book was a very fast read. I would say it was an easy read, but there's nothing easy to read about, child sexual assault and rape. That's not an easy topic to read about. It was a little exasperating that the author just could not keep his political opinions out of it. I mean, and kudos, he did not shy from repeating some of the famous names that were known to associate with Epstein. And he genuinely did, all right? Left, right, center, if it was a name that was known to have been associated with him, he named it. Good on him. But he tried way too hard to build bridges between Trump and Epstein that there just isn't enough evidence to support existing. I mean, I'm not saying that Trump never did. We don't know. We'll probably never know. There's an awful lot of redactions in those released files, right? So we're never going to know for sure. But he spent a lot of time trying to build bridges that there just wasn't the evidence to support. But then simultaneously insisted that Bill Clinton was always a perfect gentleman, which is a point that I think Paula Jones and Juanita Broaddrick would heartily disagree with. It's kind of like Levine believes all women until someone accuses someone that Levine doesn't think could possibly do it. And then it's, innocent until proven guilty, which is fairly standard fare these days. And that Trump people do the same thing, right? I don't think he could have done it, so innocent until proven guilty. I don't know that he did. I don't know that he did anything. They said there's just no evidence one way or the other. I mean, the fact that they were neighbors is not proof of anything. So he says things like, Jeffrey Epstein never flew commercial. Like other wealthy men, including Donald Trump, Epstein maintained his own fleet of aircraft that could be summoned on a whim to chart a course to the Caribbean, South America, or across the Atlantic Ocean. Utterly needless dig. It served no point. It built no bridges. It proved nothing. He just needed to get that dig in there that Trump, is wealthy. Oh my God, we all know he's wealthy. What did he actually do? Prove it. Anyways, despite that obvious political bias, it was a decent read. All right. And usually I really trash people who go for obvious political bias, but this one was kind of like, overall, this was an engaging read. It was an engaging review of a genuine monsters, Maxwell too, and someone the world is much better off without. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next Sunday. Bye.